Today on Beyond 6 Seconds.
When I'm at Starbucks at like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night writing a resume, I try and remind myself like the work I do impacts people's lives. It is just a resume, but it's also so much more because when that person gets that job, they're able to make money, pay their mortgage, send their kids to college. They're happy with life, and it's exciting that the resume I write is able to play a small part in their journey.
Welcome to Beyond 6 Seconds, the podcast that goes beyond the 6-second first impression to share the extraordinary stories and achievements of everyday people. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Kyle Elliott. Kyle is the career coach behind caffeinatedkyle.com, where he helps people find jobs they love, or at least tolerate. He's also an official member of the invite-only Forbes Coaches Council and has had his words featured on Forbes, The Muse, and Fast Company, among many other publications. Kyle loves coffee, in case you couldn't tell, writing, and eating the same thing at different restaurants. Kyle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here. So how did you get the inspiration to start caffeinatedkyle.com?
Yeah, so this really came from a love of always helping people. I always knew I wanted a career around helping people, but I wasn't really sure what that career would look like. I first started helping people at Denny's as a server. I then went to college and studied nursing. I switched to health education. I then went to grad school for healthcare administration because I wanted to run a hospital. I then switched to public administration because I wanted to do nonprofits. So I always had this love for helping people, and I also always had a love for working. I worked at Denny's. I worked throughout undergrad and grad school. I've been working full-time since I was 16. So I ended up combining the two over time. People would reach out to me because they knew I loved helping, and they also knew I loved working. So they would say, okay, you're really good at finding jobs. Help me find a job. So I would help them with their resumes, with their cover letters, with their LinkedIn. And it was always just this side hustle. And then over time, I realized, okay, I'm in college. I need to eat. I need to pay my rent. So I ended up helping people and turning it into a business. And then Caffeinated Kyle just came from me always drinking coffee. I love coffee. I usually have 3 coffees a day. And then also caffeinating people's careers. I feel like that's what I really do. I work with people who are awesome. They do amazing things, and they often just need a little jump start to their career, to their life, to take it to the next level.
Okay. You mentioned that you do love coffee, and I know from your LinkedIn profile and some of your writings that you're a big fan of Starbucks in particular. And I'm just curious, I know a lot of people love Starbucks, but why Starbucks? What's the meaning with that for you?
Yeah, I love Starbucks because of the consistency. I have OCD, so I think it's something that's just super consistent is what I love. I like routine, so it's helpful when I'm having a busy day to be like, okay, let me center myself. Let me go to Starbucks. Every day, no matter what's on my schedule, I make time for Starbucks. So it's just that self-care and making sure I make time for myself. And I'm really meaningful about my Starbucks runs. It's not, oh, I'm grabbing coffee. It's, no, I'm dedicating the next 20 minutes to caring for myself. So it's more than just the coffee, but it's caring for myself and consistently reminding myself to care for myself. So wherever I am, when I was living in Seattle, when I lived in New York for a summer, when I'm back home visiting my parents, there's a Starbucks, so I can be consistent in caring for myself and really doing that. And Starbucks allows me to do that.
Oh, yeah, I can totally see that. So tell me a little bit about the kinds of services that you provide.
Yeah, it ranges a lot. Some people come to me and they get a lot of interviews, and then they get to the interview and then they don't know how to talk about themselves. For other people, they've applied to 1,000 jobs, not exaggerating, and then they don't get any interviews, so they need help with their resume. So I'm not just a shop where I bust out a bunch of resumes for people and send out 100 resumes a week to people. I meet each person over the phone, Skype, in person, and I learn where they are in their career, where they are in their life, and what they need help with, and then help them there. So some people, it's a resume. Other people, it's just identifying what they want to do with their life. Some people, it's practicing self-care. A lot of people struggle with that. I work with a lot of really high performers. So they're doing great at work. They love their job, but they don't know how to balance work and life. So it really varies depending on the person, but typically it's centered around their career. But with that, it also bleeds into life. We spend so much of our time at work that if we're not happy at work, we're not happy with our life. So I work with people to hopefully have jobs they love. But I put that caveat on there. at least tolerate. Because for some people, a job is just a job, and I'm okay with that. And I think for some people, it's okay for that job to just be a job. Not everyone is made to love their job and it be the best thing in the world. Outside of that, I also do a lot of workshops and trainings. My background's in health education, so I love working with people to understand topics like career services, LGBT plus advocacy, mental health. There's a lot of different areas of interest I have, so I like doing those workshops because it plugs into those different areas of interest I have and allows me to pull from the different work experiences I've had and share that knowledge with people.
Right. And it really, to your point earlier, really looks at people's lives holistically. So not just career, you really have to kind of look at your whole work-life balance, and mental health and issues like that are really all part of being human and looking at our lives holistically like that.
Exactly. Even if I'm doing a LinkedIn workshop, for example, people will often talk about the stress of a job search and their mental health and how they're not caring for themselves. So regardless of the workshop I do, even if there's a set topic, it often goes well beyond that because I like looking at the whole person, not just one aspect of them, because we don't exist in silos. We don't say, okay, here's my work self. I'm going to clock in and forget about the rest of my life. Or, okay, I'm going to go home and not think about work. Our minds don't work that way. They're all integrated and they all blend together.
Yeah, I was curious to see if those topics, if you ever combined them or kind of how they intersect with each other. But it sounds like you have specific topics that you primarily talk about, and then the other types of topics like career and health and self-care are part of that presentation or that workshop. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it depends too on the audience. I specifically, when I do workshops, have it be a little bit vague or broad, and I allow people to lead it. I don't like saying, okay, here's a PowerPoint with 20 bullets on each slide, and I'm going to throw information at you. I instead like saying where people are at and allowing them to share with each other. If there's 20 people in the room, I shouldn't be the only one talking. We should all be talking, engaging, asking questions, and sharing our knowledge. Because there are 20 people in the room. That's probably 200, 300, 400 years of work experience. So why would I be the only one sharing? So I love when everyone shares and provides their experiences with work and just with life. I think that makes it such a more rich experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that you worked at a variety of different jobs as you were trying to figure out and find your direction in terms of what you wanted to do with your own career. How did your previous jobs prepare you for running your own business in general and then running this particular business that you're running now?
Yeah, I've done a lot of different things, and I've done them not at an entry level either. So I think that's uniquely prepared me for the work I do now. So at Navos, for example, one of the largest providers of mental health services in Washington, I did marketing and fundraising. So that's a big piece of what I do now. Career coaching. I market my own services and then I help my clients market themselves. Or when I worked at San Francisco State, I managed 3 of their residence halls. So it was a lot of counseling with students. It was a lot of career coaching. I had a team of over 20, and now I have a team now that I manage. My undergrad was in health education, which was all about behavior change. So when I'm coaching people, I'm coaching them on changing their behavior. My master's was public administration, which is really similar to an MBA, but just not focused on having any revenue. So now I have to make sure I do have a revenue. So all of these different experiences, I feel like when you look at them individually, you're like, oh, that doesn't really make sense for a career coach. But then when you bring them all together, it then makes sense. And you're like, oh, okay, I see how each of these experiences, when you put them all together, makes this really beautiful like mosaic that's really prepared me for where I am now.
And especially with career coaching, when I was looking for jobs myself or when I was trying to advance my career, I try to read up on different advice. And I feel like in some ways there's conflicting advice and it's, well, in this case, this might work, or in some other case, some other type of behavior or type of thing might work. You know, you said you were giving people career coaching and help as a side hustle for a long time before you started your own business. How did you figure out what advice was the right career advice to give?
Yeah, I think oftentimes people come to me and they want answers, and I usually don't start with answers. I start with questions because people often have the answer already, or they've started working toward an answer. So I found my best career advice is not giving people really good answers, but it's asking really good questions. So I feel like that's where I give the best advice. People come to me and they say, I have this important decision. What would you do, Kyle? And instead of telling them what I would do, I instead say, okay, what are the different options available to you? Okay, what are some pros and cons? Okay, what's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? okay, how does this align with your values and beliefs? How does this align with your long-term goals? And I go through and ask people these questions, and they usually come to an answer on their own. So I found my career advice isn't really career advice, it's more career guiding. And guiding them toward an answer that they may have in mind, or if they don't have an answer in mind, at least making sure their answer is informed. So I found that's really where I excel at, asking people really good questions and guiding them on that path.
I see. Along those lines, you talked a little bit about how your previous jobs prepared you for running this business. What would you say are the most important skills that you've developed over time that you're now using to run this business? And I'm sure coaching is one of them, and asking good questions.
Yeah, I think that coaching and asking good questions is a really important skill that I've brought here. I think also patience is really important. Something that some people struggle with is that patience piece. So you may work on a marketing campaign to get new clients, or you may be working with a client and you want some progress to be made immediately, but people take time. Our habits are deeply ingrained in us, and it takes time to change those habits. So patience is so important. And then also being able to deal with ambiguity. When you run a small business, especially one like mine where there is not recurring revenue, you have a client, you work with them, and especially with my clients, they're looking for immediate solutions. So they want to come to me, get a job. So if I'm doing a really good job, there's going to be super high turnover in my business. So there's a lot of ambiguity about where's my next paycheck going to come from. Okay, I get a client, and then next week I have to start all over and get more clients. So I think with me, one of the most important skills I've learned is dealing with that ambiguity, not knowing what's going to happen. So when I worked at San Francisco State, for example, I would be on call. We would rotate being on call for a week at a time for all the dorms. So at night, when everyone went home, I would have a phone call. And if there was an emergency that one of the resident advisors couldn't handle, they would call me. So at 2 a.m., I would get called and they'd say, okay, one roommate threw a chair at the other roommate. Help me, what do I do?
Wow.
And there's no manual for what happens when a roommate throws a chair at a roommate. We have general policies and procedures around violence and stuff, but there's no specific policy for a chair being thrown at a roommate. So I'd have to decide what to do in that situation. So I think that really prepared me for dealing with the ambiguity and just saying, okay, here's what I think would work. Or let me ask questions. Okay, why did they throw the chair? What's happening right now? Have the police been called? So I think being able to deal with ambiguity is a really great skill for someone who is in any field that's creative or requires you to really just go out there and deal with people in general.
Wow. Yeah. And I can imagine that particular skill that you honed, which you're describing as dealing with ambiguity, it also reminds me of another important skill, which is thinking on your feet, which was always kind of an obscure concept to me, but you described it really well. It's dealing with ambiguity, asking good questions, and then making a decision quickly or helping other people to come to a decision quickly.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really just thinking on your feet and being ready to kind of make a decision and stand by it, or make a decision and then see what happens. And if that doesn't work out, then say, okay, that didn't work out. Let's try something different.
So in your current business now, can you tell me a little bit about the biggest challenge you faced in either launching or running your business, and how either did you address it or how are you still addressing it?
For me, I tend to have a lot of ideas. I drink a lot of coffee, and I'm also just a very anxious person, so I tend to get a lot of ideas all the time. And I think they tend to be good ideas, and some of them are bad ideas, but I get a lot of ideas that I want to do, and I want to do them all immediately. That's part of the reason I wanted to start a business, was because I had all these ideas and they weren't happening. So that's the most challenging part for me. I'm like, okay, I want to create a course. I want to create a workshop series. I want to do webinars. I want to write a book. I want to put something on Amazon. I want to go to these conferences. So for me, it can get a little overwhelming having all these ideas and not being able to implement them right away, or feeling like I can implement them all right away and then getting a little overwhelmed. So what's been helpful for me is I'm a visual person. So I have a wall where I write things on a Post-it and then put it up on the wall so I can see it all and get it out of my brain. It's all jumbled in my brain, and then I put up on this wall. And I write a date on it. Like in 2019, I'll revisit that. Or in May, I'll think about that. So that's really helped me because it can get overloaded. Myself, I can get overloaded with all these ideas. And I know a lot of people who start out businesses get overloaded with just all the tasks they have to do. I work with a lot of freelancers or small business people that have reached out to me for advice. They're like, oh my God, I have to start an LLC, open a business bank account, I have to get insurance. And I was like, just write it all down. every day tackle one item and it can be helpful. But getting it out of your brain, out of your mind, and seeing it visually can be really helpful. And at least for me, it's been helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm a to-do list person, and there is a certain level of relief and joy of writing stuff down and then checking it off or moving it into a time frame. So I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, and that's honestly been the biggest challenge, and it's still something I struggle with. Also, something that's been good is my staff. I sent a picture of my Post-its, and I had 6 of them that were priorities for 2018. And I said, if I send you any tasks outside of these 6, reply no and say I'm not allowed to do it. So they've been holding me accountable. And one of my staff kind of manages all the projects. And she's been replying no, or she's like, oh, do you really want to focus on this? So that's been helpful. And then anytime I spend money on anything that's more than a few $100s, I have to call my mom. I don't actually have to call her. I manage all my own money, but that's kind of a check. I call her and say, hey, mom, I want to spend this money. And she's like, is it within your 6 priorities?
Wow.
So I found it really helpful to have people hold me accountable and make sure that I'm staying in line with what I promised myself.
That's awesome. In big corporations and businesses, there's all that built-in management and procedure that looks at and keeps that. But when you're on your own, I can see how it could be potentially overwhelming when you have so many ideas and you want to go in so many different directions. But what a great system to help keep you, as you said, accountable to your priorities. That's awesome.
It's been really helpful because, like you said, I think a lot of big businesses have those checks and balances for a reason. Like any check over 5,000 needs a second signature.
Right.
And when you're a small business, you don't have that. And you're like, oh, it's great not having all this red tape. But then I'm realizing some of that red tape really was helpful. So maybe I need a little red tape on myself.
So what has been your most meaningful success story with a client so far?
A lot of people come to me super frustrated with the job search. They have often applied to a lot of jobs, and not heard anything back. Or they hear back and it's just a thanks, but no thanks. So people come to me often when they're super frustrated. And I had a client that came to me and they'd applied to a company that they wanted to work at. And they'd applied like 10 times and not heard back. And then I helped them with their resume on LinkedIn. They applied to the job again. And the next day they got an interview and then ended up getting hired. So I think that was exciting. They were super defeated. They had applied to a lot of jobs, especially this job they were excited about because they had applied 10 times. So it wasn't just, another job. They wanted this one.
Sure.
And it was exciting being able to help them and them see a result so quickly. And what I always remind myself about with the work I do is I'm not just like writing a resume, but I'm affecting people's lives. And I think when I'm at Starbucks at like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night writing a resume, I try and remind myself like the work I do impacts people's lives. It is just a resume, but it's also so much more because when that person gets that job, they're able to make money, pay their mortgage, send their kids to college. They're happy with life. Our careers play such a big part in our life, and it's exciting that the resume I write is able to play a small part in their journey.
Wow, that's wonderful. And just thinking about all the different things that go into a successful career search these days, are you also a very big advocate of networking or informational interviewing? And is that part of some of the career advice or coaching that you give people sometimes?
Yes, all the time. Everyone probably gets annoyed with me because nonstop I talk about networking and how important it is. But I encourage everyone to network. A vast majority of jobs are achieved by way of networking. So I think it's important that people network. I'm big on LinkedIn. I'm on there all the time talking. But the key is to move it off LinkedIn, to have phone calls with people, to meet people for coffee and network and get to know them. And I think it really comes down to developing meaningful relationships with people when you don't need them, so that later when you're looking for a job, you can call on them and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? Or, hey, I see there's an opening at Google. You work at Google. Can you refer me for this position? So I'm huge on networking because personally, I've gone 4 jobs by way of networking. A lot of my clients have gone jobs by way of networking. And it's just one of the easiest ways, not easiest ways, but it's one of the best ways to get a job.
Absolutely. Yeah, and networking has worked well for me in the past in my job search too. Sometimes I think there's a little confusion around networking. I think everyone kind of knows it's important, but a lot of people, or at least, speaking from myself when I started doing it more regularly, just aren't really sure what that means. And I think sometimes it feels like you go out and you're asking for favors of like strangers and things like that. But it seems like, in some ways, networking is all about just meeting and asking questions to get to know people, as you said. So you just ask questions and you don't kind of lead with your sales pitch or your demands and things like that. Do you have any general advice for what good networking looks like if people are a little unclear of how to do it well?
Yes, I think, like you said, it's really about getting to know people and building relationships. If you're going into networking just wanting something from someone, they're going to know that and they're going to be able to tell real quick. So I think it's better when you're really just trying to get to know someone, learning about them, who they are, and understanding their story. And then if something comes from it, great. If not, that's still good. So if you see success as just meeting someone and knowing their story, that's true networking. If you only see success if you get something out of it that's tangible, like a job or a referral, then that's not good networking. So I think that's a good way to look at it. And going about it, I would just reach out to people to get to know them and say, hey, I want to get to know you, and really focus on that. And focus on what you're truly curious about. A lot of people reach out to me saying, hey, what questions should I ask during this networking meeting? And I say, well, ask whatever questions you're curious about. Like if you want to know what their career is like, ask that. If you want to know what their favorite sports are, ask that. Ask whatever you're genuinely curious about. So it's meaningful, not just asking questions because they're quote unquote the right questions to ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. So how long have you been working on caffeinatedkyle.com? When did you start your business?
I've been doing it for 4.5 years. So it was a side hustle for 3.5, 4 years. And then about 9 or 10 months ago, I left my full-time job to do it full-time. So less than a year full-time, but about 4.5 years total.
Ah, very exciting. What are your goals for your business? Where do you want to see it grow to?
That's such a difficult question because I honestly never imagined that career coaching would be a career for me. Maybe a year ago is the first time I ever thought that career coaching would be something I'd do full time. A year ago, I was offered to renew my contract at San Francisco State because every year you have to renew your contract, and I renewed it. So I said, yes, I'll come back. And then about a month after I renewed it, I was getting so many referrals through my business that I was like, I can't do both. I need to choose caffeinatedkyle.com or working full time. So I ended up choosing working full time for my business. So I never even imagined a year ago that I'd be doing this full time. So I honestly have no idea where I see this going, but I do know that I want to be using my skills, my experience, my passion to be helping people. It always throughout my whole career has come down to helping people. And it usually has something to do with careers because I love helping people with their careers because I'm so passionate about working. I love working. I work for fun. When I have free time, I usually do something for work. So I think I see myself doing something helping people with their jobs. I just don't know what exactly that'll look like.
That's great. As you said, even a year out, sometimes we wind up finding opportunities or finding ourselves in situations that we couldn't have even anticipated. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think it's so hard to predict the future. And I found I used to be a huge planner. I'm still a huge planner, but I used to be this huge planner in regard to my career. I was like, okay, I want to be a hospital administrator. Here's what I need to do. I need this internship, this class, all that. And then as I started just allowing things to happen as they were meant to be, as I started just putting positive energy into the universe and allowing it to come back, I've been so much happier, just allowing things to work out how they're supposed to.
Right. Very good. So how can people get in touch with you to learn more about caffeinatedkyle.com?
My website is a great place, so caffeinatedkyle.com. And if people go on there, I have a free 5-day job search course. So it covers resumes, cover letter, LinkedIn, networking. And then on LinkedIn, I'm Kyle Elliott. So on LinkedIn, I'm always on there. So I encourage people to connect with me on there.
Perfect. And as we close out the podcast today, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know or anything that they can help or support you with?
I think on LinkedIn, I would just love for them to connect with me and engage. I really thrive on helping people, and I thrive on the community that LinkedIn has allowed me to have. I work from home, so I think it's so fun when I'm able to log on LinkedIn and interact and chat with and connect with hundreds of people all over the world. So I think that's honestly the biggest help people can do is just connect with me and engage with me and allow me to share my knowledge and share my passion. That really brings me a lot of joy in life.
That's wonderful. So, I will put a link to your website as well as your LinkedIn profile in the show notes of the podcast so that people can find it there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Tyle. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show today. It was really great to talk to you and learn more about your story and your business, and wish you continued success and best of luck with every opportunity that you're finding with your business in the future.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Beyond 6 Seconds podcast. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player so you won't miss any episodes. You can also find all the show notes and links we discussed in this episode at our website, www.beyond6seconds.com. Until next time.